So I think that there's a number of things that go into deciding where to give birth and with whom to give birth. There is a whole chapter in the Motherly Guide to Becoming Mama about all of the options. And there's questions that you can answer and things in there to help sort of guide you. Some basic ideas, first and foremost, are to consider your health. If you are having a low risk pregnancy, it is possible usually to give birth in a birth center or at home as well as in a hospital. But if you're having a higher risk pregnancy, home births and birth centers likely won't, at your own health and figure out what are possibilities. Talking to your provider can help you figure out, like, okay, I have such and such medical condition. Does that mean that I can't have a home birth? And they can help you sort of figure that out. Another big piece is really looking at what you want your birth to be like. If you are somebody that really does not love the idea of pain and knows that they want to have an epidural for their birth, that's completely fine. You're probably going to have your best birth in a hospital, because if you want to have an epidural, that's where you are probably going to give birth. If you are somebody that knows that hospitals just make you really nervous and you don't like that medical setting, and you know that about yourself, leaning more towards a birth center or a home birth may be a good option for you. Also, checking in with your insurance company is going to be important, because they all cover different things. And lastly, remember that you don't have to make the decision alone. So if you're like, I'm not sure yet, call a home birth midwife and chat with her and see, or him, and see what they say. Go tour your local birth center, and trust your gut. If you walk into the birth center and you're like, oh, this is so lovely, I feel safe here, I feel calm, I like these people, it's okay to go with that. And if you walk into that birth center and you're like, this is cute, but this is, where's the OR? Like, this is not for me, I'm not into this, that's cool too. So base it on information, but ultimately trust your gut and listen to yourself, because you'll know what you want to do. And also know that you can change your mind. So if you get to, 19 weeks pregnant and you're like, this, whatever this is, just isn't feeling right, it's okay to explore your options, because many times it is still possible to switch.
What about for a second pregnancy? So again, I had a C-section. My dream was to birth at a birth center. Now it seems like I don't have as many options because my birth center doesn't do VBACs. So how would you guide somebody in my situation, or somebody who had a C-section that would like a different experience?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, first of all, spending some time reflecting on what you want to be different. Is it the C-section? And if that's the answer, totally fine. Or was it that you actually didn't mind the physical C-section, you just didn't really like the sort of way that it unfolded? So spending some time sort of teasing out what you liked and what you didn't like about the experience. And then if you determine that, having a VBAC is something that's really, so a VBAC being a vaginal birth after cesarean, is something that's really important to you, talk to your providers. When you go for that first prenatal appointment, or even when you go for like a regular GYN pre-pregnancy appointment, talk to them and just say, I really, really, really want to have a VBAC. They're going to be able to help you understand what your chances are, because depending on the whole story that led to your first cesarean birth, it can help to determine the safety and the likelihood that you could have a VBAC for your next pregnancy and birth. So talk to them and know that there are other options. So even if your provider doesn't seem to be super keen on VBACs, maybe there is another hospital nearby where they have a higher rate of VBAC. So maybe switching to a different institution and a different provider can be helpful. Also, consider talking to both OBs, doctors, and midwives. they may have differing opinions. Midwives can, in a hospital setting, and in some birth centers and home births, depending on the area, can attend VBACs. So don't feel, I guess, just advocate for yourself, and know that it's okay to get second and third opinions. And ultimately, if what you land on is, you know what, I think I actually do want to have a repeat cesarean birth, that's okay. That's great. But at least you will feel like you sort of were an active participant in making that decision, which a lot of times can make people feel better about their birth experience as a whole. So non-pandemic, when you go to give birth in the hospital, you will have either your OB or your midwife as your sort of primary provider, person taking care of you. They're the ones, working with you to arrive at decisions, doing the assessments. Ultimately, they're the ones catching the baby. You'll also have a nurse. Depending on the location, you may have a few nurses. At the time of birth, you may have a nurse for you and a nurse for the baby. You may also have a doula. So doulas are people that are birth experts who are usually hired by the birthing people to provide emotional and physical support. But they're not part of your medical team, but they are part of your birthing team. So they're not making like decisions for and with you, but they are helping you cope with your birth as possible. There may also be, other people at your birth if there's a high risk issue. For example, the team from the NICU, the neonatal intensive care unit, may come and be present to help make sure the baby's okay. Then there's anybody else that you may decide to invite to your birth. The one thing I will share is that just to remember that this is your birth, and so you don't owe it to anybody to like invite them to your birth. So if you want your mother-in-law there, if she's going to make you feel good, great. If not, it's also cool to say like, hey, if you could come in 2 weeks, that's when I'm really going to need your help, or, say what you need to say. Now, during coronavirus, most hospitals and birth centers are limiting the number of people that can come with you to your labor and your birth, just to limit the amount of risk. So most of them, at last check, we're still allowing you to have one person with you. So if you have a partner, or if you don't, bring in one sort of your partner in birth, whoever that is for you, is still allowed to come. They may have to wear a mask, but there is no limit on like virtual support. So if having a doula is really important to you, it's still very much a possibility. And most doulas are offering virtual services. And, they're not there with you, but it can still have a really profound impact. Also, having your mom be there virtually, or having your best friend be there virtually, all of that is still a possibility. In a birth center, often it will still be, usually midwives are in birth centers, OBs sometimes, but usually midwives. You'll also still have a nurse. Birth centers tend to, not during a pandemic, tend to have a little bit more flexibility in terms of visitors. So you can like if you have an older sibling, like an older kid, they may be able to come with you to your birth center birth. If you have, like, you want to have 3 or 4 people come with you, they may be able to, again, not during a pandemic, but under normal circumstances. And then at home, this is your home. So in a lot of ways, the midwife that's coming to deliver your baby at home is like your guest. So oftentimes you are just in charge. So if you want to have the midwife, her assistant, and your partner, and that's it, great. Or if you want to have like 10 people, like it's your house, during the pandemic, that probably wouldn't be recommended. That would definitely be a social gathering. But you have a lot more control over who gets to be there when it's your own home. I think the first thing is really tuning out the noise, and getting in touch with yourself. We, especially as women, tend to be people pleasers. So we like don't want to hurt anyone's feelings, and I'm like so guilty of this. But really, like, this is your baby, like this is you. So really try to tune out all the noise and just get really like grounded and centered and focused on yourself. And then be really honest with yourself. We all have people in our lives who we love, 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 and they just stress us out. you know, that's probably not the best person to have in the room with you. Somebody who brings like a really calming energy, somebody who you don't feel like you would have to entertain. If you feel like you just need to be in labor and like yell, you don't want to be embarrassed to do that. I mean, ever, but especially in front of this certain person. So making sure that it's someone that you can be completely yourself with. And then also, if you do have a partner, have lots of conversations with them and say, like, how are you gonna be during labor? Because, when talking about doulas, for example, doulas are very much there for the birthing person, but they also help the partner a fair amount. So if you have a partner who's like kind of not super into medical stuff, or like the sight of blood, there's not a lot of blood, but there's a little, and the sight of that will freak them out. Like, maybe having a doula would be a good option for you, so that your partner can leave the room once in a while and not like have to worry about who's going to be with you. Or maybe you feel like you really just want it to be a really intimate experience with just the two of you, and you don't like the idea of having a doula there or anybody else. Like, all of that is completely fine. It's just a matter of really honing in on what it is that you want from your experience.